This is It's an Inside Job, and I'm your host, Jason Lim. This is the show where we explore the stories, strategies, and science behind growing resilience, nurturing well-being, and leading with intent. Because when it comes down to it, it's all an inside job. Well, welcome back to the show. I'm glad you could join me for a new week. There's a stretch of time that doesn't get talked about much. It's the space after something ends, but before something new begins. You've left the job, the relationship, the role. People naturally ask, what's next? And you smile, say you're figuring it out. But inside, it's quieter than you expected. It's heavier. Well, this episode is an inside piece drawn from the 3 intimate conversations with former athletes. Emily Houston, Isaiah Neal, and Abiola Wabara, each of whom stepped away from elite sport and found themselves in that middle stretch. Not the dramatic exit, not the triumphant comeback, but the part in between where identity unravels and rhythm disappears. We talk about what it feels like to lose the structure that held your days together, to miss the rooms where you didn't have to explain yourself, to wrestle with language that no longer fits, and to sit with the quiet grief that comes when a chapter closes, even if you choose to close it yourself. So this isn't a reinvention story. It's a reflection of what people do when the scaffolding falls away, how they find rhythm again, how they contribute before they feel confident, and how they speak the truth before they have the answers. If you find yourself in that space right now between what was and what's next, well, I think this episode is for you. Transitions are rarely clean breaks. They're not just about leaving something behind. They're about losing the rhythm, the relationships, and the identity that came with it. In my conversations with Emily, Isaiah, and Abiola, what emerged wasn't a story of dramatic reinvention. It was something quieter, more honest. The slow, often uncomfortable process of figuring it out. Who you are when the role that defined you is no longer there. Emily left elite volleyball twice. The first time, her body couldn't keep up. The second, well, her mental health needed care. What she noticed wasn't just the absence of competition. It was the absence of rhythm. Practices, travel, team meetings, even the shorthand of locker room talk. All of it had created a framework for her days. And when that disappeared, so did the sense of who she was within it. She didn't rush to replace it. Instead, she created space for herself and eventually for others through a community called Home Team, where athletes could land softly in the middle stretch. Isaiah, his transition came suddenly. After 14 years of football, a concussion ended his playing career. The physical recovery was difficult, but the emotional fallout was harder. He lost access to the locker room, the relationships, the routine, and the sense of belonging. Without that, depression and anxiety crept in. He describes that time as one of unexpected isolation, where the absence of structure made space for self-doubt and fear. What helped wasn't a grand reinvention. It was a conversation. Isaiah spoke honestly to someone who could listen without judgment, and that act, naming what was hard, well, it helped him begin to rebuild. It didn't solve everything, far from it, but it did give him a foothold. Abiola's shift from athlete to real world, well, that shift was a lot slower. After multiple knee surgeries, her professional basketball career ended earlier than expected. The loss wasn't just physical, it was structural. Practices, travel, team rituals, all gone. It all disappeared. Her calendar no longer organized itself around a clear purpose. She describes waking up to days that felt unanchored and a sense of usefulness that had evaporated. Her way forward started with a shift in language. Basketball is something I did, not who I am. That distinction, well, it helped her separate her identity from her role. It didn't erase the grief, but it gave her room to explore other ways of contributing. She stayed close to the sport, not by playing, but by supporting others, observing, mentoring, and staying connected helped her maintain a sense of usefulness. These stories aren't about bouncing back. They're about staying steady when the ground shifts, about finding something to hold on to when the scaffolding falls away. What emerged from these interviews wasn't a formula. It was a set of emotional and practical patterns that show up when people are navigating the middle stretch. Patterns that don't promise clarity, but offer traction. You, dear listener, might recognize yourself in one of them, or all of them. Now, across these stories, a few practical patterns emerge. Ones that apply whether you're leaving a sport, a job, a relationship, or a phase of life. So now I'd like to take time to draw from the key patterns from this middle stretch from my 3 interviews to understand some of the common denominators that we can apply to our own transitions when we find ourselves in that space, that uncertain space between chapters of our life. When the rhythm drops out. It's strange how quickly time changes shape when the scaffolding disappears. You go from a life of alarms, deadlines, check-ins, meetings, to a calendar that's wide open and somehow heavier. You sleep in, then feel guilty. You make coffee, scroll, pace. You tell yourself you should be enjoying the break, but it doesn't feel like a break. It feels like a drift, like your life has become untethered, unmoored. Take, for example, someone who's just left a demanding job. They were used to being needed, scheduled, and in motion. They're now waking up in silence. No one's waiting. The day feels like a long hallway with no doors. They try to fill it with emails and errands and maybe a podcast. But it doesn't stick. It doesn't mean much. The absence of rhythm and pattern makes everything feel optional. And when everything's optional, nothing feels urgent. And that's when the mind starts spinning. That's when it goes down the rabbit hole of rumination and overthinking. What helped them wasn't a new job or a master plan. It was choosing 3 things to do every day, no matter what. Wake up at the same time, go outside, and talk to one person. Not for productivity, but for sanity. It gave the day a shape, and shape, even a loose one, makes it easier to breathe. Because we have a pattern, we have a routine, and it's those small steps of rhythm and rhyme and pattern which lead to a trickling of confidence. And slowly, we start seeing that we are in transition, that this won't last forever. And then we start seeing the possibilities and the opportunities. The weight of the room. We just don't miss the role, we miss the room. The place where our shorthand worked, where people got our jokes, where we didn't have to explain ourselves. And when that room disappears, it's not just the job or the relationship that's gone. It's the fluency. You're suddenly translating yourself in spaces that don't speak your language. I mean, think of someone who just moved out after a breakup. Their new apartment is quiet, too quiet. Dinner feels strange. There's no one to ask, how was your day? They try to recreate the rhythm, cook the same meals, keep the same bedtime, but it just doesn't land. The space doesn't just feel empty, it feels foreign. Eventually, they start going to a local community class, not to make friends, but just to be around other people. And over time, the space becomes familiar, not home, but close enough. It's not about replacing the old room. It's about finding one where you don't have to perform, where you can just be. The words we use. Language is sneaky. It tells stories about who we are, even when we're not sure anymore. I'm a teacher, I'm a partner, I'm a parent, I'm a founder. These phrases feel solid until the role ends. Then they feel like costumes you're no longer wearing, but still carrying around. So imagine someone who's just stepped away from a caregiving role. For years, they were the ones who knew the medications, the moods, the routines. Now when someone asks what they do, they tend to hesitate. I used to care for my dad. But now I'm figuring things out. It feels like a downgrade, like they've lost their place in the world. So one day they try something different. I spent the last few years caring for my dad. Now I'm learning how to take care of myself. They write a short bio for their social media that says, former caregiver, current explorer. They start a blog, not for followers, just to practice saying things out loud. They experiment with new verbs. I'm learning, I'm rebuilding, I'm contributing. The shift isn't just linguistic, it's psychological. It opens up a space for a future that doesn't erase the past.
Feeling useful again.
When the role goes, so does the feedback loop. You're no longer the one person people come to, the one who solves things, the one who's in the mix. That silence can be brutal. You start to wonder if you still matter, if you're still good at anything. Self-doubt, self-criticism creeps into your mind. Now, think of someone who's just retired. They were the go-to person for years. Now, no one's asking. They try to stay busy, read, travel, maybe take a class. But it doesn't scratch the itch. What they miss isn't activity, it's impact. Then a neighbor asks for help with a project. It's small, but they say yes. And something clicks. They remember what it feels like to be useful, not important, just helpful. That moment leads to another. They offer to help a friend prep for a job interview. They join a local mentoring program. They start sending articles to former colleagues with a note, thought of you. These aren't just grand gestures, but they're connective. Confidence doesn't roar back. It kind of trickles in. And usefulness is the path it takes.
Saying the thing.
Transitions are full of unsaid things. You don't want to sound dramatic. You don't want to worry people. You don't want to be a burden. You don't want to admit that you're not okay. So you keep it light. I'm figuring it out. It's a good change. I need the break. But inside, you're spinning. You're spinning out. Now take someone who's just ended a long relationship. They've moved into a studio that still smells like fresh paint. The first night, they eat takeout on the floor. The couch hasn't arrived yet. They scroll through their phone looking for someone to text, but the person they used to text about everything, they're gone. The next morning, they wake up early, out of habit, but there's no one to make coffee for. They go to work, smile through meetings, answer, I'm good, when asked how they're doing. But they're not. They're exhausted from pretending. One night, they write a message to a close friend. I feel like I'm disappearing. They don't send it. The next day, they do. The friend replies, why don't you come over? They sit on the couch, say the hard things, and don't get fixed. They get heard. That's the shift. Not advice, not solutions, just company and the truth.
The quiet grief.
There's a kind of grief that doesn't get named. It shows up when a chapter ends, even if you choose to end it. You miss the rhythm, the people, the sense of being in motion. You feel sad, but you don't know if you're allowed to. So you rush through it. You try to be grateful. You try to be positive. But the sadness sticks. Now picture someone who's just left a high-profile job to pursue something more aligned with their values. Everyone congratulates them. They smile. But inside they miss the team, the pace, the feeling of being in the loop. They wonder, did I make a mistake? Did I make the right choice? They start writing about what they miss, not publicly, just in a notebook. They reach out to a former colleague and say, you know what? I miss our Monday chaos. The colleague laughs and says, me too. They join a small peer group of people in transition. No networking, just real talk. They build a playlist of songs that help them through the last job and listen to it on their walks. And so slowly, they stop treating grief like a problem. They treat it like a companion. They don't push it away. They accept it. It's part of the process. And that makes it easier to carry. If you're in that uncertain space right now, between roles, between relationships, between versions of yourself. Well, I can guarantee you're not alone, and you're not broken. You're in a transition, you're in flux. And transitions by nature are always going to be unclear. They don't come with instructions, but they do come with signals. You might notice the absence of rhythm, of a pattern, the loss of room where you felt fluent, the quiet that follows when a role no longer defines your days. Again, that's not failure. That's the space where something new is trying to take shape. What these stories show is that you don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need a 5-year plan. What helps is much simpler. A bit of structure to hold your day. A space, physical or relational, where you don't have to perform. A shift in language that gives you room to grow. And someone who can hear the truth without needing you to wrap it in a lesson. You don't have to rush to a new identity. Often it builds quietly through small acts of showing up, through contribution and being seen. And one day you realize you've been someone solid for a while. The title? Well, that comes later. And if you're supporting someone in that space, someone who's just left a role or is quietly unraveling from one, your presence matters more than your advice. You don't have to fix it, just notice, stay close. It's that kind of attention is what helps people last longer, to move through the storm, to help them through the transition. When we find ourselves in the transition, the space between chapters of our lives, it can feel uncertain. It can feel like we're unraveling, that we're unmoored, that we have no sense of purpose or pattern or rhyme or rhythm in our lives. And this is normal. This is completely normal. And when we're in that space, it can feel like it'll drag on forever. And I can tell you from experience working with scores of people over the year, it's not a question of if things will change, it's just when. And just remember, the transition is usually the ramp up to write the next chapter. And thanks for joining me for another episode. And until next time, keep well, keep strong, and we'll speak soon.